So as you can see from your booklet, we are having a conversation which has been dubbed Balancing Public Order and Constitutional Freedoms, a candid conversation on safeguarding East Africa's civic space for a thriving democracy. As our colleagues come in, allow me to just set the context for our conversation, and then we will start off with our panel. As I said earlier this morning, this could not be a better time for this conversation, primarily because the urgency of the moment in Kenya demands it, but not just in Kenya, but across the region. What we've seen consistently in Kenya is a slow erosion of civic space, which has been sharpened into open assault. We saw extrajudicial killings during the 2024 finance bill protests. Again, we saw the same in 2025. And alongside this, we saw enforced disappearances. We've heard names bandied in the media, the story of Albert Ojwang, Diangui Kenyagia, who is the current focus, Peter Kenyanjui and Wanjiko Thiga, who went missing from Kiambu. And these are just a few of the names that have gone across our social media spaces of people who have been forcefully disappeared. From a Missing Voices report released in 2024, there have been at least 159 cases of enforced disappearances between 2024 and 2025. And these are not isolated cases. These are not anomalies. What we are seeing are isolated actions of rogue officers. We are seeing a cold and calculated effort to crush any new thinking before it can take root. We are seeing a deliberate campaign to silence voices. We are seeing a deliberate attempt to silence an entire generation, a generation whose vision and vitality, not just Kenya, but the region desperately needs. We are seeing bullets, surveillance, and arbitrary arrests alongside smear campaigns where young people are being told their lives do not matter. Their dreams for a better Kenya are too dangerous to be allowed to live. And the message that the state of Kenya appears to be sending is chillingly clear. Dissent is not merely discouraged, it is punishable by death, disappearance, or silence. We've also seen attempts to legalize this repression. So starting in 2024 in Kenya, we had the Assembly and Demonstrations Bill, and then we've seen the Public Order Amendment Bill, which is sponsored by Honorable Esther Passaris. We've seen prohibitions or proposed sweeping restrictions, things like you have to give between 3 and 14 days notice to have a protest. You have to give us very detailed information. We need your name, your address. What routes are you going to be using? What slogans are you going to be chanting? What placards are you going to use? And if you violate the proposals in terms of just giving a notice, you are liable to a penalty of up to 100,000 shillings and imprisonment of up to 12 months. We've seen proposals in those bills seeking to give more power than is necessary to the police, allowing the police to reroute demonstrations, to restrict attendance, to limit expression, or even cancel a protest entirely. And what is a threshold for exercising this discretion? Just perception of a threat. Worse still, we are seeing proposals to make conveners of protests personally liable for any violence or damage that results from protests. So what we are seeing in Kenya is an attempt to legally sanitize repression. But this is not just the case in Kenya. What we've seen across the region is a borrowing of repressive tactics. In Tanzania, we recently saw the crackdown on civic actors. And so the conversation that we are having across East Africa is how do we move away from this reframing of civic freedoms as threats to national security? How do we restore protests to have them no longer being seen as a democratic tool, but not as an invitation to disorder? So the conversation today is not just about public order or constitutional law. It's really at the heart of our democracy. It's what happens when freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and dissent become threats to the state as opposed to being guaranteed by it. What I'll be inviting Christine, Njeri, and Wageshi to reflect on is how do we balance between public order and constitutional freedoms when the very idea of order is being weaponized by the state against the public? How far can the limits of state power go in regulating dissent? How can lawyers and the law be used to resist the normalization of repression? Because it is clear what is attempted by the state is to normalize repression. What safeguards must we now think about putting into our architecture to protect protests, to prevent dissent, but also ensure survival of our democracies? And it is a great pleasure to guide the conversation this morning. Thank you, ladies, for joining me. And thank you to Christine, who is joining us online. So I'd like us to have a conversation that starts with a reflection. I'll ask the same question to all our panelists, and then I'll go into specific questions which will go to each of the speakers based on their expertise. So I'll start with Christine, and then I'll come to Jerry, and then to Wageshi. So my question to all the panelists is, what does it truly mean to balance public order with constitutional freedom, particularly in contexts where order itself is being used or to dismantle dissent, or is being weaponized by the state to dismantle dissent? How do we strike this balance between public order and constitutional freedoms in contexts like what we've seen in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Uganda, and other countries? So Christine, if you can hear me, I'd like to have you go first, and then we'll have Jerry and Wageshi.
Thank you, Luciana. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. And first and foremost, I'd like to give my appreciation to the organizers of this meeting for inviting me to attend and to contribute to this very critical discussion, not only in Kenya, but within the region. As Luciana has aptly put it, it seems that within our region, we are having a wave of regression on civil rights, civil and political rights. And among the most critical of these civil and political rights is the right to freedom of assembly, association, and the right to protest. And as Luciana said, what do we do? Because again, if we take the example of Kenya, we have the right to association, the right to assembly, the right to expression guaranteed in our constitution. So the constitution sets the benchmark upon which citizens should exercise their rights and upon which the state should exercise control. Right, these three rights, the right to assembly, association, and expression might not be absolute, but they are guidelines set down in the law that give us the parameters upon which we as citizens can exercise those rights. And those parameters in our context, and actually in the context of most democracies, is set by law. And this is what we mean by rule of law and governance by law. Because what we are experiencing in Kenya right now is people or state officers changing the benchmarks every day when the citizens want to exercise their right to assembly, by making roadside declarations, by giving directives that are not entrenched in law. By and large, by such conduct, they are violating the constitution, they are violating the law. Because what guides the balance is the law. It's set in the law. And as long as the law stands, and as the law in Kenya right now stands, the right to regulate expression, the right to regulate protest, the right to regulate association is very structured and a law that is liberal. So what we are seeing is deliberate, reckless disregard of the law. So the law right now is not what the problem is. And what we see in this situation, what the law demands is that we reach a proper balance between ensuring public safety and ensuring the right to liberty. The right to liberty encompasses all these freedoms we are talking about: expression, association, and the right to assembly. So if the balance is skewed, again, towards giving too much control to the state, then you lose people's liberties. Why are we guaranteeing the rights to liberty? Why is it important in democracies? Because democracies, by their very nature, are participatory governance systems, governance structures. The right to expression, the right to assembly and association and expression are meant to encourage civic participation by the people. There are certain rights that are extremely crucial and dependent on the right to expression and association, especially political rights. It's very hard for citizens to organize around political issues if they are not allowed to meet, if they are not allowed to give their views, with like-minded people. And if they are not able to ensure those views are heard by other people in society, that's how I convince you to my point of view. That's how I convince you to accept my political ideology. And that is guaranteed through the right to expression. The other issue that is very critical in our democracies, which the rights to assembly, association, and expression actually guarantee, is accountability. You cannot have good governance if the people do not hold the government to account, and especially in the growing democracies. Growing democracies where institutions are very weak, where governance institutions are meant to be tools through which we actually sustain accountability, and democracies are weak, then the voice of the people becomes extremely critical in ensuring that we do not have rogue states, and we don't have rogue governments. So what I'm trying to say, the balance of power right now between state control, and I'm not saying about state control just for the purposes of state control, it is to ensure public safety. Public safety and the right to expression and liberty must be balanced. And therefore, when the state is exercising that control, any limitations on those rights, since they are very critical to growing democracies, must be necessary, and it must be the least intrusive of those rights. So that's how we guarantee the balance. And any attempts to actually skew the balance towards the state to the detriment of the rights of citizens should be strenuously objected to by everyone who values democracy. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. The reminder that democracy is participatory, and even where there are limitations of rights, there must be only such as are necessary and the least intrusive. We'll come back to you with another round of questions, but I'll now invite Njeri to also respond to the same questions.
Thank you, ICJ and the partner, for inviting us here. And this is a very timely, or maybe a bit late, my 3 points, because of the 3 points I'm going to raise, that indeed in East Africa, we have rogue leadership. Burundi, Rwanda, it's often ignored, but in Africa, we have only 12% of Africans who have gone to university overall. But what are these 12% Africans who have gone to university doing to make sure that the nations in this region are actually, they're the ones that understand the Constitution, they are the ones that have been privileged, have had the opportunity, have had the gift, really, to get that knowledge. What are they doing with that knowledge to assist? And that's also now why the legal minds here, ICJ and others, how much are we doing? Are we going to keep watching the disadvantaged East Africans going to the streets, suffering and being killed, while we who have the power and the knowledge to actually assist in the next milestone, we are not doing anything? So that who's going to help us with the rule of law, really? Yeah? And then the other point that I'll be discussing throughout this, so these are the 3 points I'll be discussing, is the public participation. Kenya has a huge, one of the best gifts this country got in the Constitution is public participation. Because with public participation, we are allowed to petition, we are allowed to picket, we are allowed to demonstrate, we are allowed to do everything, and even means that we understand right now that the governments we have 12% of Africans are sitting pretty and in their homes, on their televisions, watching as the other half, the 82% is getting murdered out there, and that we must not compromise the gift we have of public participation. I'm going to be, as you ask more questions, I'm going to be still coming back to these 2 points, but I want to say, if we are unable to see ourselves in each of those spaces as a public participant, as somebody who's going to fight the rogue government, or as somebody who is among the 12% who can go to court, like right now in Kenya, I don't know why we don't have like 1,000 cases on pro bono basis of people, because anyone, in the new constitution, any one of us can go to court and say enough is enough. No more killings, no more this, no more this. But we're waiting for those people who have no money to give us instructions to go to court to do what we are. The highly educated citizens. And I'll come to the other points as you ask.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you for reminding us that there is a collaboration. Question we must then ask is, what is our response? If they're collaborating, how are we collaborating? Allow me to invite Wageshi to give her reflection on the first one.
Thank you, Luciana. Good morning, everyone. Really a pleasure to be here. I am the Executive Director of the Independent Medical Legal Unit, that's IMLU, that works very closely with ICJ and a lot of other partners working in the areas of governance, democracy, and human rights. The question is a question that at times makes me struggle, because really there shouldn't be the need to think through balancing of what is provided for and guaranteed in our constitution vis-a-vis what is happening on the ground. And being a person that works very closely in regards to monitoring and documenting human rights violations around enforced disappearances, police brutality, torture, extrajudicial killings, I'm here today wearing a very heavy hat. One is to note that the institutions that are mandated to ensure oversight, to ensure that things are going according to the provisions set out, have been captured. That there's no independence, that there's no moral obligation, that there's no individual responsibility to ensure that those institutions work according to, the reason why they were put up. When I think that these institutions are paid through taxpayers, that Kenyans are toiling every single day, that, we've seen lots of poverty and, economic hardships, but these people are sitting and enriching themselves and not being able to ensure that the freedoms, and as my co-speakers have said, fundamental freedoms of expression, of association, of picketing, of assembly, a right that makes sure that our voices are heard, then it becomes a very, a very sad conversation. Now, looking at what has been happening and the repression that we are seeing, I think we need to just call it as it is. When the young people, the youth, the Gen Zs started this process last year, it was a very strong Gen Z-led process, a process of calling it out, a process of, at that time, rejecting a finance bill that was really going to, dampen the pockets of Kenyans deeply. But what has it transitioned to? It's transitioned to a people's movement, an uprising, a time when Kenyans are saying, no, we cannot take it anymore. So it's only a poor government, a weak government that does not listen to the will of the people, that does not listen to the voice of the people. And so because they get threatened by the voice of these people, then they take it out on the people by killing them, by disappearing them, by torturing them, by arbitrary arrests. If you look at the numbers that are in court yesterday and today, if you look at the numbers of people that we are burying by day, it's really, a sad state of affairs. Being an organization that works closely with ICJ, and we are in several platforms together, in 2023, we documented 67 extrajudicial killings. In 2024, we documented 63 extrajudicial killings, 89 enforced disappearances. Now, at the midpoint of 2025, by just before the protests last week, we had documented 42 extrajudicial killings in the hands of police. And then come the protests, we recorded another 19 deaths. So you can do the maths. We are not even, this is midpoint. So the balance question is a question of ethics. It's a question of constitutionalism. It's a question of entities not doing what they're supposed to do, but allowing themselves to be used by the state. And I think until we start holding each of these entities to account, until we start calling out and not giving up, calling out NPS, calling out Parliament, because Parliament needs to have an independent voice, but we know the capture there. So for me, I'm not blaming them, I'm just calling them out. And I'm saying the people's voice will win at the end of the day. Because you cannot shut a voice that has woken up. And this is a voice we have had, not by mouth, but by action. And so we need to get back to addressing what is the issue. What are the structural causes of why we are where we are at? Just this morning, one media house called and asked me, so how are we going to ensure these deaths end? Because we are saying the Esther Passari's proposed bill is really just taking us back. We saw the Ruku bill, draconian. And I said, it's not even about these bills. Number one, how does zoning off a protest route, how does giving powers to a cabinet secretary curtail deaths? It just honestly goes back to anger people more. It goes back to frustrate people more. And the more you're pushed to the more you're pushed to a corner, the more the voice will want to find a way. So I think as an introduction, I want to just emphasize on the role of every agency, of every entity paid for by the taxpayers, funds, that they need to play their rightful role, and that East African community, the African community, I think people have woken up and they have said no more to these repressions. Yeah.
Thank you, Ageshi. And we'll come back to the question of where do we go from here later in this discussion. But before I come back to Christine, I'd like to have a follow-up question to Jerry, because Jerry has spent quite a number of years, decades, I believe, in civil resistance and social movements. And even as we frame the conversation of where we go from here, it's important to reflect on where have we come from. Because one of the things that has been raised repeatedly is that the Gen Zs have not accepted the wisdom of those who have been a part of the resistance before. And so one of the things I'd like Njeri to just reflect on is how does the current legal and political climate compare to earlier eras of authoritarianism? Are there cycles that are repeating? Are there new things that we're seeing? Or is it the same thing coming and playing again in our generation?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. What I want to say is that, and I usually say this to the Gen Zs when I'm speaking to them, is that compared to where we've come from, they have all the freedom. They have all the freedom they need to change this nation. In the years that I was a Gen Z and an activist, we had what was called the Preservation of Public Order Act, which allowed the state to pick you at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or whatever hour they wanted to pick you and disappear you for years. It was in the Constitution of Kenya. We had the Chiefs Authority Act, which could not allow more than 9 people to meet, even for a birthday party, even for a wedding preparation. If you exceeded 9 people, or if you knew you were going to exceed 9 people, you would have to ask for permission and have a chief's letter there in case anyone comes to you. And of course, there were the sedition laws that disallowed us to read books, to sing songs, to say poems, to watch plays, and everything was hide and seek with the government. So I challenge, as I speak to Gen Zs, I usually tell them, you have no idea how much freedom you have. And therefore, what is happening with the rogue government in Kenya today, just now zeroing down to Kenya, should not even be happening at all, because there is nothing in the Constitution of Kenya, in any other law that we have, that allows for any government to speak the way they are speaking, to do the things they are doing. Everything they are doing is outside the Constitution. And that's why I was challenging. Those who know, sitting, educated, aware. Why are we just sitting and allowing our young people to be killed and to be harassed while the Constitution of Kenya protects us? So we are at such an advantage, but we are behaving as if we are disadvantaged. So now I'm speaking like an activist. As an activist, you never behave as if you are disadvantaged, even when you are. Because in my time, we were so disadvantaged that it was really a game of hide and nobody could hold such a meeting like this. We couldn't speak the way we are speaking, so everything was underground. And you'd only come up to do something overtly when you are sure that nobody would arrest you, or just do it and take off. So how do I want to conclude this? That the advantages we have as Kenyan citizens and that we can influence the East Africa region are higher than any other time in the history of this country, irrespective of what the state is doing. And that the state, as I speak now, half of them should be in the jail here, in the ICC, in the East Africa Court, in the Africa Court, because everything they are doing is against the Constitution, is against the East Africa. We also have, it's not a Constitution. What do we have in East Africa? Yes, and also the Africa. So why have we allowed, with all the freedom that we have, why have we allowed ourselves to be boxed as if we have no freedoms? And there's no freedom that will be given to, even when you have it. All the freedoms we have are inherent. We were born with them. But until you grab it, nobody gives it to you. In fact, it's like somebody will always try to take it away from you. So you have to show them that you cannot take this one away from me. And what the Gen Zs are doing is right, but they are isolated. And those who know that they should not be isolated because the laws of this country allows them to do everything that they are doing are watching, like me, on TV. So when are we going to step out and do that extra that we are allowed? And you are talking about the Chapter 15 institutions. Wangeshi is talking about the Chapter 15 institutions. We gave ourselves a guarantee in the Constitution under the Chapter 15 institutions that will be the cover and protection of our Constitution and the cover and protection of our citizens. But what have we done? We have allowed, and me being as citizens of Kenya, we have allowed rogue CEOs to be put in those positions who have no clue what those institutions are supposed to be doing, and therefore, instead of protecting citizens through those constitutions, they are protecting the state. So it's like we are losing everything we have. But because we have it in the Constitution, and I hope you all know that even these little things they are doing, bringing bills that cannot, anything that will undermine the Bill of Rights in the Constitution will have to have a referendum. It will have even these Passaris bills and everything. If it is undermining the Bill of Rights, it has to go to the referendum. Because what it means is you are amending the Bill of Rights to prevent those freedoms that are guaranteed there. So I wouldn't even worry about those bills, but I would worry if nobody is raising the issue that this is a referendum matter. And of course, when it's a referendum matter, the government cannot win. So moving forward, the history of this country is a very dynamic country. We have always, at every stage, and I usually refer to a Kikuyu word called Jaba. Jamba are the young people, the warriors of the nation, the youth, the people who are energized. Every stage and history of this country has always had the Jamba come out and fight. From the Mau Mau, they were young people. They were not old people. We see pictures of their wives and as old, but when they went to the forest, they were young people. And throughout in this country, we have had young people throughout stand out. And therefore, what the Gen Zs are doing is not strange, but it needs to be defended and protected very quickly before we lose it. So the challenge is back to all of us, the 12%. Who have the opportunity to use the courts, to use the media, to use the forums that exist to challenge every statement that is said by a CS that is undermining especially the Bill of Rights. Because I also hope that you know that the only reason we have a constitution is to defend the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. That is the only reason. Every other chapter is supposed to be there to defend the Bill of Rights. And therefore, the day and the minute and the second the Bill of Rights is touched, every person aware should be rising up in their different forums. I'm not even asking you, I can't go back to the streets now. I keep telling those Gen Zs, I don't think my lungs can take that tear gas anymore, and I don't think I can run fast enough. But what I can with my mouth, with my writing, with my groups, I can speak out and disallow certain excesses to happen. So I just hope that we can save this nation before it is too late. And I can assure you, if we save Kenya, we will save East Africa. You know, Kenya has always, and it's not out of pride, it's not out of arrogance, but Kenya has always led in terms of anything to do with civil society, anything to do with human rights, anything to do with speaking out and standing out. If we fail, the region has failed. But if we stand out and be very firm, despite what they do to us, because they are going to, but and I'll speak to that later, what they can, that they are going to continue But you know, you can only arrest so many people, you can only kill. So even during the Moi days, when he had the right, you know, Moi acted within the constitution and the law of Kenya, by the way. He detained people within the constitution of Kenya. He jailed people within the law of Kenya. What is Ruto doing? Everything is outside the law and outside the constitution. So we need more than the demonstrations on the streets. We need other actions to take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Wow. I think it's good to remember that we have made strides forward. Sometimes when you watch the news and listen to the reports, it's easy to lose hope and feel as if we have gone back to the pre-1990 era. But it's good to be reminded that we are still not where we were before. But you have also raised a very fundamental question, which is that the movement has always been led by young people, and the movement in Kenya inspires what happens in the region and in Africa, and this is why we must not give up. Thank you for that. I want to come back to you, Christine, if I may, and I want to take the conversation back to the Constitution. Jerry has already alluded to it, that we have a powerful constitution, so the question is not whether the law provides for these rights. The question is why the executive acts in direct contravention of these rights. And so what I want to hear from you, Christine, is how do we interpret these extra-legal assaults to the rights of assembly and expression? They're already in the law, but the executive is choosing to ignore those rights. And is there still a meaningful space for constitutionalism to push back against this rollback of our rights? Or should we consider ourselves to be in a post-constitutional moment? So where do we go from here, where the Constitution is concerned? Over to you, Christine.
Thank you, Luciana. First and foremost, I don't think we can be fatalistic. We cannot afford to be fatalistic and say we are existing in a post-constitutional world and we are existing in a post-legal law, being led by the rule of law world, because what else remains is anarchy. So what will remain is the rule of the jungle. So we must actually be insisting that we are actually still within a constitutional framework, even if we have government actors that are contravening the law. And I think we can take courage and hope from what Jerry has said, because we all know power is transient. Regimes come and go. This regime will come and go, that's for sure. And we always need to prepare ourselves to look for opportunities for accountability, either within this current regime, as minimal as they are, or even in the in the time when this regime is out of power. And as I think Wangeshi and Jerry talked about Chapter 15 constitutions, those were meant to be our first bulwark against unconstitutional actions by state actors. And now we can see they are very, very severely diminished. They are not able to do their work as they are envisaged under the Constitution, mostly because of deliberate action by state agencies and state officials, so that you don't have people of the right character, the right moral aptitude leading these institutions. And the other way that the state has, the other tool that the state has used to weaken these institutions is through denial of resources. So through denial of material and human resources, then make these institutions unable to operate the way they were meant to under the law. So the only other bulwark we have under our constitution in Kenya is the judiciary. Unfortunately, it seems that at the moment, the judiciary is the only arm of government that we can go to for recourse, because we have a totally captured parliament and we have a rogue executive. And I will use that word very clearly, because everything they are doing, most of the actions they are doing, especially in relation to the right to assembly, association, and expression, is contrary to the law. So they are also in abuse of their powers and in abuse of the Constitution. So what we can only rely on at the moment is the judiciary, to the extent that it can be able to function within this a climate of impunity. And I have to, at this moment, give due regard and to the judiciary, they have managed to do a bit of stellar work in this climate that we are in right now. They have managed, in relation to the protests since last year, to give critical guidelines and critical pronouncements on everything from, can police officers go out in the street when their faces are covered with backlavas and everything else? Can they use tear gas indiscriminately? Can they use firearms indiscriminately? Do you prioritize property over life? Right? Do you the right to life is sacrosanct, and the courts have said you cannot prioritize life, property over life. What you can only do is actually arrest someone and have that someone subjected to the law of the land in relation to malicious destruction of property or anything else that relates to the law on property, but you're not allowed to be judge and executioner and kill somebody on the spot on the basis of activities they are carrying out during protest. So we are seeing the judiciary being the only safeguard we can go to right now. And the problem is now a number of those judicial pronouncements are not being respected. But as I said, there's always moments of accountability. We are coming towards a moment of accountability in regards to this regime in August of 2027. That's a moment of accountability. And citizens can decide to exercise that platform, to bring accountability, to bring any change. What we can do now as human rights defenders, as activists, is document everything that is happening and try to seek accountability when that that time comes. There are other issues we can actually do right now in relation to courts, and this is in relation to anyone who has contravened the Constitution. There's still ability to go to court under the Chapter 6 to have courts declare that these government officials are in contravention of the Constitution, they're in contravention of the law, and they should not be allowed to hold public office. And we have seen in certain cases, like with previous governors like Waitito and Sompo, they have not been able to hold subsequent offices because of these pronouncements by the courts. So whichever CS gives pronouncements that are contrary to the Constitution, even if orders come from above, is not insulated from the functioning of the law, irrespective of orders from above. Any police officers who carries out orders from above, irrespective of the law they know to be in place, is not insulated by those pronouncements. So moments of accountability will come. What behoves us is to make sure there is documentation, use the mechanisms that are available, as weak as they may be, as hard as they may be right now, because we can't afford to give up, and we cannot afford to say we live in a constitutional world right now in Kenya. The government in place is occupying their positions because of the Constitution. If the Constitution was not in existence, then they cannot be legally in office. So we clearly are not in a post-constitutional world, and we need to continue operating as being within a constitutional regime. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, for asserting that we are not yet in the post-constitutional order. I think there's been a lot of questions asked about, are we making traction with the protest? We came to the streets to commemorate the ones who died last year. We lost more people. We've been complaining about enforced disappearances and asking for people to be produced. The security agencies keep saying we don't have those people. And so it's very easy in this context to lose hope. Why do we keep doing the same things and they don't appear to be yielding the results that they are yielding, that we want them to yield? But it's very important that you've highlighted that the judiciary remains a very strong bulwark against the unconstitutional actions of the executive authority. Where other institutions have been co-opted, the judiciary remains a very firm institution that we can go to push back against the extra constitutional actions of the executive. And we'll come back to you, Christine, but I want to usher in Grace, because she does a lot of work with enforced disappearances because her work is at the intersection of law, medicine, and human rights. Grace, maybe you could speak to us about what we can do now. Yes, we are working with the courts. We are trying to make sure that people who have been disappeared are produced in court. But beyond what we're doing with the legal mechanisms, what else can we do to prevent further extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, and the misuse of public order doctrines to justify legal force?
So, as I said earlier, I think some of these solutions are really pinned down to the public. That this is our time, this is the public's time to ensure that all these human rights violations come to an end. We have to keep speaking out, we have to keep documenting at personal level, at institutional level, and I'll tell you, there's nothing as powerful as documenting and preservation of evidence. The evidence that we see through social media, the evidence that we use for mainstream media, those captions that, you know, at individual level, people take thinking that I'm just taking a piece of a video, they are really important. As we say, this rogue regime, one day is not going to be in that office. And we keep repeating, this regime will not be in office forever. So there's still an opportunity to ensure, whether it will be the ICC or it will be another court, justice will be realized at some point. Other things that we can do is just to ensure that we keep being each other's keeper. When one of us disappears and we keep quiet, we're actually creating room for more to disappear tomorrow and the next day. So I love what Kenyans are doing. I love the fact that we keep quickly sending out information that so-and-so has been abducted, so-and-so is missing, so-and-so has been arrested arbitrarily. And then we gather, we sort of mobilize and convene around that. And we push for, you know, their release. We push for them to be presented in court. I know that we are at the blink of losing hope, but we cannot afford to lose hope. So we keep being each other's keeper. We keep reaching out to organizations like ours and the many others that we work with in the Police Reforms Working Group, who quickly run to court. Like today, most of the entities actually in court, representing many different Kenyans that have been arrested or even missing, and we are pushing for them to be released. But the other important thing that I would like to emphasize is, and I love Gen Zs for that, is understanding the provisions of the different policy and legal frameworks. So what does the National Police Service Act, for example, state in regards to the role of police in public order management, the role of police in ensuring safety? You know, they actually mandated to ensure that human rights are protected, even as they manage public order. The law is very strong on preservation of life. The law is very strong in ensuring that the freedoms that are guaranteed in our Constitution are actually, you know, enjoyed and fulfilled. But then we get individual police officers, we get commanders, people who hold the authority of issuing certain instructions and commands going out of the ambit of what the law provides. And this is where the issue of individual command responsibility comes in, a very important aspect in management of public order. The truth is that whoever issues these instructions, the command that gives these instructions is actually liable and should be and will be held to account. The person actually receiving these instructions, the law provides for them to actually say no if they are actually not aligned to what the law provides for. So I think we are past the days where people said, oh, I was following an order, or, you know, my command said this and that. I mean, we cannot live under those shadows. And just echoing the words of Jerry, we really must be the ones to push for accountability. And I'm talking about not just the young people. The one thing we cannot do as a society is to leave the burden of pushing for change to the young people alone. So it's time for Kenyans to hold hands together, and for the rest of the East African communities, just to be part of the change. Because they say that violence thrives in silence. And that is what we are seeing with all these enforced disappearances. But now what has been done is to cause fear. By disappearing these young people en masse, we cause fear. By withholding information, we create panic. Yesterday, I was in a sitting where people said that they're now more afraid of being near police. They see police and they're more afraid of police and guns. And I felt very sad. Because this transition from a force to a service that is supposed to be there, utumishi kwa wote, meaning that we are, we support, we ensure your safety, that we push ourselves beyond the call of duty to ensure that citizens are safe. But that is not what we are seeing. The other issues around, as I mentioned, preservation of evidence. The evidence is not just in terms of photos and videos and the messages. It's around ensuring that the persons that are injured, when we lose loved ones, the processes, the protocols that are set, that are in place, are actually followed. These people need to be rushed to a medical facility. There is documentation, a proper method of documenting the injuries that we use. I was reminded yesterday of a young person who unfortunately had died as a result of a bullet wound. And the family saw the body. But when they went to the mortuary the next day, the person had, a cut and they had been, what do you call it, sutured back, yeah? So already that bullet wound had been, interfered with. But the beauty is that the family had taken photos. So and that pushes for accountability. And when we do things like autopsies, the postmortems that, like our organization conducts, if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for the fact that we pushed for that, Albert Ojwang's case would still probably be reading a suicide, So just being aware. Right now we are saying people who have collected bullet shells, anyone, during the protests, please document. Just say, I found this in this place. Don't interfere with it. If you can hold it with a piece of tissue, because they are collecting them and going with them. And this time around, police were actually telling people, go and bury, don't do, there's no need of doing a postmortem. Don't. When you see a bullet shell, collect it. Use a piece of tissue and note what was the location, where did you find it, take a photo, and then present it. Because these are the pieces of evidence that will enable us push some of these cases to court. And as I said, we are not limited, and I think Christine has mentioned that, we're not limited to the boundaries of Kenya. We will go to the farthest end. I know when we had the ICC case, there was a lot of intimidation, there was a lot of interference, but I think we learned from that, and that's another possible direction. The other thing is courage. Let's not give up. I think, Jerry, you've asked a sad but important question. How many are they going to kill? It's really painful that they have killed so many already. But let's not be cowed down and pushed to fear, because that is what the intention is. In fact, the regime is very deliberate. They know what they're doing. Every single pronouncement is meant to create more fear. They know that Sabasaba is coming, and they want to make sure that nobody goes to the streets. So it's intentional, the acts that they take. So for us, I want to just say, let us keep the fight on. It's not a futile effort. We are fighting for change for this country. We are fighting for change for our children and their children and the children to come. And so it doesn't matter. Democracy is also expensive. But we have to keep fighting. Finally, just keep note of the legislative, process, and the fact that we are being pushed and disrupted with what is happening. to make us forget to keep an eye on the legislations that are being pushed through the back door. So we do know that as we are fighting, as we are looking for people who've been disappeared, bills are being pushed into parliament. We need to make sure that some of us are keeping a very keen eye on those processes and not accepting that these find their way into legislation into this country. Let me leave it at that for now, and now I can answer questions.
Thank you, Ageshi. And I'll allow a couple of I'll allow a couple of questions just before we go to the keynote. I want to just invite Jerry to just give us a final reflection because she spent quite a bit of time in advocacy or activism. In this current context, there's attempts to build movements, some of them intergenerational, on where we go from here. And so in this context where there's a lot of fear, as we said, people are now wondering, should I join the next protest? Should I just stay home? And especially with the increase in violence against women, there's a lot of legal intimidation. How can today's generation of activists resist despair or the other part, which we've complained about, co-option?
Thank you again. I think there's the person controlling the mic. Hello again. Okay, maybe just to add something before I come to directly responding to the question, to add to the earlier question that we have the gift of social media, we have the gift of emails, we have the gift, we used to use fax, I don't know what. We have the gift of mobile phones, we have the gift of myriad community and national radio stations and television stations. Actually, everything this nation needs to change this country overnight exists today that did not exist. We used to use those phones and there were call boxes at different points of town. So you'd go there and wait because you have agreed that at 2 p.m. somebody would call that call box because you don't have a phone and that's the only safe way anyway because your parents will not allow you to use your activism business on the phone at home. We didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have social media. We didn't have radios. We didn't have television. We had one radio station and one television station, VOK radio and VOK TV. It may sound not arrogant now, another word, I don't know, another English word. But what are we waiting for with everything that we have that frees us? We have external freedom and we already have the internal freedom. The freedom that we know we are supposed to do, what we are supposed to do. We have gadgets, we have opportunities, we have institutions, we have things that never existed. And yet, in that atmosphere, this country was changed and a new constitution was ushered in. Yeah? So again, I may have even lost the thought of the question, but I want to also refer to two things that I experienced years back. I lived in South Africa between 1998 and 2004, back and forth. I would come back to Kenya, but I lived there working for Amnesty International. But one of the things that shocked me, because I had just come from the streets in Kenya and then gone to live and work in South Africa, is a protest from Johannesburg to Pretoria by the matatus there, they call them taxis, which takes 2 hours, it's a 2-hour drive, is being escorted by police the whole day because they are driving at 10 kilometers per hour, 2 kilometers per hour, they stop, they dance the whole day, then they move again, then they dance. They are escorted by police. They are taking a petition to Pretoria to the president, and the police are escorting them to make sure there is nothing wrong with the protesters. If any faint, they take them. I was so shocked. Of course, that is no longer the South Africa. It has changed. But that is where we need to be, where the police are protecting every demonstrator. I think we saw the case in Embu or somewhere where a police officer decided him is not going to fight the people, he's walking with them. And that was the most peaceful demonstration throughout Kenya on the 25th of June, because the police saw their role as protecting the people. So that's one example I want to give. Then I want to give another example. Again, during that period between 1998 and 2004, and I know Brian is probably online or is going to listen in, we lost Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe as a nation that was admired by many was lost during that period because of diplomatic, I don't know, quiet diplomacy, all sorts of things that South Africa and the nations of SADC were doing as atrocities were happening in that country. So countries can be lost. Countries can be lost. I saw Zimbabwe come from, Zimbabwe was one of my favorite African countries, especially the freedom of, I have never seen so many writers in a country like in Zimbabwe. Everybody writes. Everybody writes. Small books, big books. The freedom to write, the freedom to express yourself, the art in Zimbabwe. And then one day it was there, and the next day it wasn't there. Zimbabweans were all over the world as refugees. So a country can be lost. And we can lose Kenya. And if we lose Kenya, we have lost East Africa. So what was the question again? But before I come to, so let me just, maybe I'll just conclude with points that I had. When we look at traditional democracy, the meaning of traditional democracy, we are told it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Meaning that exercising power should come from the people, it should be by the people, and that the purpose of leadership should be what the people want, not what you want once you get the position. And in our constitution in Kenya, you know, we start by saying, we the people, we the people. But we keep forgetting the minute, and then the minute we give power, it's a delegated power, meaning we can take it back anytime. We can take it back anytime, and we should take it back. Not just that we can, we should actually take it back. And we have so many methods of taking back this power. So, so as citizens, we need to recognize that we have the supreme sovereignty. Our constitution guarantees us equality over everything, and that it guarantees us the rule of law. When we forget this, we lose an inch. We forget something else, we lose a foot. By the time we react as a nation, we will now be, it is total war. Like now it's almost total war. It is a war against the citizens and a minority in government just because they have arms. But that should not be a scare. And I don't know how I can put this to show that actually, and I call her my general, little Wanjiro, said, when we lose our fear, they lose their power. Yes. It's actually just that. Fear to go to court. I would see, in our days, I would see Paul Moite, gangs and gangs of lawyers going to court in numbers. First of all, numbers protect you. Yeah. And I've seen it here also, especially last year. I've seen lawyers go, but it's now we can do it more because we have the freedom that we didn't have even when we were doing that. So maybe just to conclude, I think I've lost whatever it is you had asked me, but just to conclude, Kenyans and East Africans should remember that authority to govern comes from us, the people. Even in DRC, where there's trouble every day, they can change it. They can change it. Even in Burundi, they can change it. Rwanda is an interesting case. So I don't want to spend more time on Rwanda because it's a complex case of where of where they continue to say they have democracy and yet do they not? I don't know. But even in DRC, they can turn around that country the minute they recognize the power is with the people. And because I used to do a lot of training, and I was doing a lot of training in Zimbabwe, they used to tell us, Njeri, you don't know. Here the army comes out, which is true. In Kenya, the army was not coming out. Yeah. In Uganda and Zimbabwe, they said the army comes out. Therefore, they can't do anything. But it is possible to even turn that around. Even when the army comes out, they can never be more than the people, and there are those with a conscience. There are always those people with a conscience. And I've seen some tactics that the young people are using, saying hello to the police, even boarding their vehicles and moving with them. Make them your allies. These people are your allies. They are Kenyans. And when Kenya bans, they will ban in it. And in fact, from what I saw, one police officer being chased, they will be killed. Because once you don't have your 20 colleagues, and once your gun runs out of bullets, they will kill you. So you would rather, it is in your interest as a police officer to actually be with the people rather than be against them. So as I said, I have forgotten what you asked, how you wanted me to conclude, but I just want to conclude. Citizens must recognize, irrespective of what role you play, that you have the power.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. I know we'll have just one question at the end. I think what I wanted you to do for the Gen Zs is to give them hope, to help them retain optimism in light of what is happening, and resist co-option, which is one of the battles that they're having within the movement. But I know we'll have a minute or two for you to speak to that. Christine, if you're with us, your final question is, where does the legal fraternity go from here? We are doing our best within the courts. But what must we do to continue to defend the Constitution, both in theory and also in enforcing the consequences? Of course, we know the executive is also selective in obedience to court orders, or crafty in the way they respond to court orders. We saw what DCI Amin did when he was asked to produce Diangui. He issued a press statement instead of appearing in court. So what can lawyers do to not just defend the Constitution in theory, but also ensure that we are actually practically realizing the fruit of the Constitution and of litigation and advocacy?
I think for me, first and foremost, we have within ourselves as lawyers, and especially the governing body of the legal fraternity in Kenya, the Law Society of Kenya, first and foremost has a fundamental obligation to actually enforce compliance of the rule of law for members within its fraternity. It is the governing body is meant to ensure that anyone who has taken the oath, because we all take an oath once we are admitted to the bar, that we will uphold the Constitution and the rule of law in Kenya. So it has a fundamental duty to ensure that actually those people within its framework who are in breach of that oath of office, as we take as lawyers, that there are consequences. So we could not have lawyers who are public officers, who are being given the mandate to govern in other areas, and those people are breaching the laws of the land, and the Law Society of Kenya just stands away from that. So it has a fundamental obligation, first and foremost, to ensure that what its members took, that the oath that its members took, that they must uphold that. There must be consequences for breach of that oath. So first and foremost, that is one thing that Law Society of Kenya needs to do. The other thing that the Law Society had begun a couple of years ago was actually they were building a database of all court decisions and looking at those court decisions that had not been implemented. So we need to know what is the balance of the law. How do the cookies fall? We need to know what is being implemented, what is not being implemented. We need to also know how do we seek, at what points. As I said, there are always points in time, whether through elections or through appointments, that these issues can be brought up. So if we continue monitoring, we'll be able to know which orders were directed to whom, and who obeyed court orders and who disregarded court orders. Because again, as I said, there are moments in time that come up that give us opportunities where those actions or inactions by public officers can have consequences. That we need to, as a legal fraternity, to continue speaking the truth, continue advising the people as to their rights. We cannot be cowed by pronouncements by the political class that now the Law Society of Kenya is getting into politics. Governance by its very nature is political. We cannot dissociate governance from politics because the people who have been we have placed in power come through a mechanism of politics. So by its very nature, as lawyers, we must intersect and participate in politics because politics always affects governance. And so we must continue our advisory role. We must continue our role of disseminating information to the members of the public vigorously, because the legal fraternity is a huge fraternity and it's found all over the country. We must continue as well with the very good work that the Law Society of Kenya has been doing by giving legal aid to Kenyans who have been illegally arrested, unlawfully charged with crimes. So we must continue to stand up and give these services to Kenyans. Lawyers must continue to stand at the forefront of using the courts and the court system to fight for the rights of Kenyans. That is something we cannot be cowed into not doing. And last and not least, I think the other thing that the lawyers need to continue doing, and together with the people of Kenya, is to continue to fight for the independence of the judiciary. If the judiciary fails, we might not be able to win this battle. We must continue to ensure that we retain an independent judiciary. We must look at those strategies that are being used by the political class to weaken the judiciary, whether through unfounded claims of misconduct against certain judges that they perceive to be anti-regime or pro the people. So we must be able to stand in and advocate and defend the judiciary where it's warranted. Of course, we also must call out the judiciary for misconduct where it's warranted, but we must not fall into the hole that is being dug by politicians to actually chip away at some of the good judges that we have. So that is what the Law Society of Kenya must continue doing. The Law Society of Kenya must also take up its role together with civil society of monitoring laws that are before Parliament, laws that are trying to regress our rights, laws that are trying to claw back on our rights, and go to court to actually have those laws declared unconstitutional. So as I said, we can't give up because, again, we will continue to use the tools we have, ineffective as they may be, but as I said, there are always points of accountability, and there are always points where everything that we have been doing comes in and helps. And also, actually using the judiciary also offers a sort of public diary of what is happening. Because what we are seeing is also a narrative that is a misinformation narrative of lies being peddled by the state, trying to gaslight people, trying to say what we've seen with our own eyes and heard with our own ears, that no, I did not say that, that is not what I meant, that is being misquoted. No, using the judiciary also helps us to have a public diary of whatever is happening, and at some point, those public records can be used for accountability. So I'll leave it.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for reminding us that lawyers cannot stop. They must continue to push. And I'm going to bring this to an end, but not before allowing Grace to give us her final reflections, and I'll also allow Jerry to just speak to just the last question that she forgot to answer. Grace, you spoke to us about the importance of documenting, recording, and why we must not stop doing those things. But I think the question that comes to mind is, how do we then shift that recording from statistics to actual justice? Once we've done the reporting, we see reporting coming out from your organization, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, Missing Voices. So how do we now move those statistics to actual justice?
Thank you. So a couple of things. Obviously, one is working together in a coordinated manner to ensure that these statistics are not actually just statistics, but evidence for court processes, evidence for higher level advocacy. So why we document is not just to state that X number. Remember, it's not about numbers. It's about each individual that we lose. It's about each individual that is lying in a hospital bed, each individual who's been maimed and can never walk again. So, of course, we are pushing for reparations for a lot of the victims and survivors. We have several cases that are pending in court. We are definitely pushing for accountability, and I've stated that we will use every mechanism, and we're using every mechanism, including the East African Court, the special UN mechanisms and procedures. So we have all those that are available for us. But as I sort of put close to this, my reflections, number one, Article 1 of the Constitution is one of the most powerful, freedoms that we are guaranteed. The sovereignty of the people. The power belongs to people. I think that is really key for us, and we have to use it whichever way. Number two, for the young people, even as we continue with picketing, as we continue with expressing ourselves using different mediums and modalities, remember that change will happen at the ballot box. It does not matter how much we talk. And in order to celebrate the heroes that have fallen to bullets and to batons and to rubber bullets and, all the injuries from tear gas and all, the only way we can really celebrate our heroes, and I hope we are all listening to each other, we must get to the ballot box. And we're not going to get to the ballot to put people who give us 50 shillings and 1,000 shillings to, make it look like a public space has people listening in. Enjoy the money. Go out, pick all those 3,000. But on the day of the ballot, vote change. Vote people who put Kenyans at the heart of where it belongs. Number three, civil society, Gen Zs, and everyone have to work together. There's a role for each person. There's a role for the voice of the people on the streets, through social media, through whichever platform that we have. But there's also a role for the civil society organizations. We're very strong when it comes to providing services. We are very strong when it comes to advocacy. We are strong on documentation and evidence preservation. We are strong on holding government to account. We also work together because, we are only safe in as much as we work together. So the politics of division, and especially within civil society, have to end. We are hoping that the religious community, and I'm happy that they have started speaking, can join the people and really pronounce themselves. We are hoping that every gatekeeper, every space will begin to work. Number four, the role of the independent entities, constitutions. I really pray that one day they'll realize that we are their employers. They may be appointed by whoever appoints them, but we are their employers. And they have to live to what they are supposed to do. I'm reminded that now we are beginning to experience professional commissioners. Yes? People hopping from one commission to another. People who are, I don't know whether we are that few in Kenya, that only so few can be in these positions. But as I keep saying, their day is coming to an end. Let's hold them to account when they're in those offices. Call them out. We have to call them out. Do not fear. We really, really must call them out. But as we do that, remember some of these institutions are weakened deliberately by the state so that they cannot function. So defunding of institutions, influence and interference with their independence, appointments that are not within the provisions of the law, please keep an eye on IEBC. Please keep an eye on IEBC. We're getting into the elections. That is where things begin. And finally, change will only happen because we will not give up. We will fight for a country that we so love. Gen Zs are being called the enemy of the people. I'll actually tell you who the actual enemy is. It's become the people against the state. It's a state against the people. And it's not even a functional state. It's a rogue regime against the political elite. We stand together. We stand united. We keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Ageshi. Wow. I know we are now going to move to the keynote address. I'm waiting for the team to cue me. But as we do that, I'll allow Jerry to just give us her closing reflections on two things. How do we avoid despair? How do we avoid co-option?
Yeah, thank you. Hello? Okay. Hello, okay. Thank you for giving me this second opportunity to actually address the question, hope for the Gen Zs and resistance of co-option. I just want to share something around this. I don't think people are necessarily co-opted. I think they are already cops by the time they join. What we learned that out of every 10 people that are sitting to plan an activity, 2 are cops or sent there already to work with you and send information. So you cannot avoid this, but be aware of it, but let it not deter you. Because if you fear and say, oh, you know, we used to, anyway, because of the arrest, we used to walk like this, You even had to check the haircuts of the police officers, you know. That one is, if that they have that haircut, they are special branch. If they have what, you know those things. But now, what I've realized is, even now, and I see those Gen Zs talking, given airtime, and you can tell from the way they are talking, from the fact that they appear every day on media, and the things they are saying, you are thinking, why are they saying that? That's not, you can tell, you can pick them out. So they are not co-opted. They are already cops who joined the struggle. Yeah? But be aware of that and move on and keep moving on. You are 8 and they are 2. They'll give information, but you can change. You can keep changing the final details to the final day. Yeah? So don't fear. And I want to give one very critical example at Freedom Corner. You all know about the Freedom Corner, the Mothers' Hunger Strike. If you don't know, go and find it out. At one time when the cops became too violent and the mothers realized that young people are going to be shot, because young people now joined to protect the mothers when they were being disbanded at Freedom Corner, 2 elderly mothers who understood what a curse is, they stripped naked. They stripped naked. As they stripped, one woman who was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, who had been coming there to support the mothers, also stripped. She stripped, she removed her blouse and she removed her skirt. So she was there in a bra and her panties. But the women, the mothers, stripped naked completely and threw their legs. I don't want to. Later, we came to discover this youngish woman who stripped was a cop, had been coming there to pretend to support the women, but she was a cop. And that's why she dared to strip, because me, I didn't even understand what the stripping was about. I was so shocked. I didn't understand. I didn't know about the curse. But she thought that is the way to buy her legitimacy. It is a way to buy her legitimacy. People won't suspect her as a cop. So those people who come into the groups, they can even do more things than you are doing, so that you accept them. So the message to Gen Zs is just keep moving. The genuine ones, just keep moving. Those ones will tire, they will be exposed, they will fall on the wayside. And finally, we, the people, have the power. And no one can take that from us. Let me end there.
Wow. I think the panel deserves a better round of applause. Hold on. Let me help you. Let me help you. Let me help you. Let me help you. All of you put your hands in the air. Both hands. I can only put one. Both hands. If you're holding a device, put it down. Okay. I just want to see. Okay. You just do this. This is also your energizer before we go into the keynote. And now bend in front of yourself. Assume you're collecting applause from the ground. Assume you're collecting, expand your hands, collect as much applause as you can. And now toss it to my panelists. Toss it towards them. You're tossing the applause towards them. Everyone doing it? Fantastic. I believe that was a fantastic panel session, wasn't it? Allow me to thank Christine Konge appearing virtually, Njerika Beberi, Grace Wageshi. You have been fantastic. Thank you for the conversation. Allow me to allow you to take your seats. We will now go to the segment that we had missed earlier, which is the keynote address. Okay, so I'm told we're still getting our speaker online. So I'll ask if there's any question in the room as we do that. I see a hand already at the back. So that's one. I see a hand from Mama here, two. I see a gentleman, a friend from Uganda there, three. If I could have someone kindly assist me with a microphone. Please let me know what your question is and who you would like it addressed by. Please keep it brief because we're just buying time for the keynote address. So I'll start with the gentleman at the back. I'll come to Mama here and then our colleague from Uganda, and then we'll close.
Thank you very much. My name is Jacob Emoit, an LLB finalist at the University of Nairobi. And listening to our three panelists, made my blood to really boil for change in this country. I mean, you all have really, really inspired me, and at least to, keep hoping that, change is coming. And there's something profound that Christine said, that trying to tilt the balance between attaining public order and enjoying the constitutional freedoms that are guaranteed in our constitution must not be allowed at all, especially in favor of the government. And looking at that bill that Esther Passaris is fronting in Parliament, that is exactly what that bill is trying to do, trying to tilt that balance in favor of the government. And mine is just to call upon all of us in this room to make sure that we don't allow that to happen. If none of you is going to go to court, I'm going to be the petitioner in that particular case to challenge that bill that is coming. We must not allow it because it is a threat to our to our democracy. And my question finally was to our panelists. Any of them can answer, because we've realized that there is power in numbers. How do we conceptualize this movement beyond our borders? Because we want to carry everybody along as we are walking in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. So you don't want Kenyans to be the superstars that we have been on the internet. I hear people saying when Kenyans enter the internet, everyone else must leave. So how do we carry our regional brothers along? Mama, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Samuel Hashimi. I'm a lawyer, Sudanese lawyer. I have been listening not only with my mind, with my heart. Actually, what are the panelists saying is just typical to what happened to Sudan. Actually, peaceful demonstrators, we started long time ago, maybe when we managed to organize ourselves, it was in 2013, and the revolution succeeded in 2019 or 18, December 18. But let us learn from the experiences that we had, not only from Sudan, from the Arab Spring 2011, and be aware that dictators have a syllabus. same syllabus, same book. They are reading from the same book. So try to avoid all the faults that happen. Actually, you guarantee your friends, but you can't guarantee the dictators. They are very innovative in making mess and try to break the unity of the people. So my advice, if I may advise, is to bombard them with constitutional cases that and name and shame, use the media, use the international press about talking about what's happening in Kenya. We are looking very high and up to the Kenyan young generation and the people of Kenya, and we don't you to fall in our case. Now we are in a war since 2 years, and this is the 3rd year, and because of the regional and international interest parties energizing and fueling the war, when the country falls, all the interested regional and international will come and will benefit from that that situation. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. There was a question here, and you just reminded me of something. I see those hands. You just reminded me of something that happened in Kenya in the early 90s. Senior Counsel Feroz Nabraji spoke about filing cases, not necessarily thinking that you're going to win the case. You've spoken about inundating them with cases. Some cases you don't file because you're going to win them, but you use them as a platform for addressing the state and the world. So that, as Christine said, we create a public diary of what is happening in the state and we correct the political narrative. Thank you for that. Our colleague from Uganda, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Michael Aboneka from Uganda. Of course, the panelists talked about how worrying it is in Kenya, but sometimes us from Uganda, we look up to Kenya in some ways and say there's hope. So, so yes, the situation is not very bad in Kenya. Njeri talked about the 12% Africans who have gone to university, and she asks the question, why aren't they participating in these issues? And I think I also want to ask her, why aren't they? Or how do we ensure that they are part of, the processes and participating in the change processes? How do we get them to do that?
There's already a question for Jerry. How do we get the 12% to participate? There's a couple of hands. There's a lady at the back, and then there's a gentleman here. So I'll start with the lady at the back. Jerry, I'll also ask you to speak to the question of the regional mobilization question. How do we bring along our regional colleagues so that we are moving together? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Antoinette. I'm from the DRC, but I've been living in this country for almost 24 years. So as the Ugandans say, it is true. Kenya is in a much better place, and consequently it needs more defense than anyone else, so that you don't sink in different waters. Yeah. So, but my question is, I think actually the three speakers were very clear and very passionate and have actually achievements and credibility to what they've been doing. It's a question of resources I want to raise. Democracy in poverty doesn't really work. and then if democracy needs money, the one who has the money controls the agenda and the narrative, which might not be necessarily that of the voices that are not being heard. So I haven't had in the three interventions much emphasis on that question of resources. And I think maybe the speakers might not address the question, but it's something that the whole group of excellent minds here should be thinking of. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette. I think that's a fantastic question, particularly with what we're seeing across the continent of state capture. We saw with the Gupta family in South Africa. We've seen it in Kenya, elements entering the state and working with the state to oppress people. And of course, the state is very happy to collaborate to get kickbacks. That's a fantastic question. How do we fund democracy in these kinds of contexts? There's a gentleman here who had a question as well. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I am Jean-Marc Segoun, working for Foundation. The panel developed some concept regarding governance by law. I think that is a good concept. But I would like to invite you to thinking about the link between governance and memories. How the common memories can be the best way to sensibilize the people who have the power, to tell them that there is a life after power. There is a life. I think that is also the best way for accountability. How the result of investigation, how the result of monitoring of human rights violation can be the way to sensibilize, how the dissemination of the result of the case of human rights violation can be the best way to tell them that after power, there is a life. That is my point. Thank you.
Thank you. So I believe it's not a question, it's just a comment that you wanted us to reflect on.
Sure.
All right. So Jerry, there's a couple of questions which have been raised. How do we get the 12% to participate? And then how do we push this cross-border movement, this regional movement? Please help us with those.
Okay, I'll try, yeah? So first of all, let me work on the 12%, because that has disturbed me a lot since I discovered that that's all, only 12%. And I'll connect, I think, everything. The different methodologies, as you talked about, Firoz Doroji talking about going to court. Doctors, what we've seen here in 2024, and I'm sure we also saw like the Red Cross, and now Red Cross comes out in emergencies. This time they put camp outside on the streets to help Gen Zs who are injured or anybody who was injured. These are different methodologies that involve everybody, every cadre, every citizen in their own way are involved. We've seen how the media is really fighting back. We've seen when they were locked up, how they went, when they were closed down, how they went to court immediately, and how they went to their YouTube channels, and how they continued to give us live coverage. And we've seen how the Standard has really fought, and they've been closed down. You know, a lot of things, a lot of negative things are happening to media owners and media houses, but they are still fighting back. Because we have the opportunity. Remember, I talked about one radio station and one. Now we have opportunity. You have YouTube. You are closed down, you go to YouTube. You are closed down, you go to Instagram. You are closed down, you go to something else. So there is no excuse. Let me just keep saying there is no excuse. So this 12%, even in your professional suit, in your professional whatever you do, think what you can do. What can I do? Like the doctors are coming out. I saw Surveyors issued a very, very stern statement against the government abductions and against the killings of Gen Zs and obstructing surveyors. So if surveyors who have nothing to do with law, have nothing to do with treatment of people, can issue statements, it means whatever the profession of the different people is around the country and around the continent, they have a role to play. There's nobody who doesn't have a role to play. So that's what I want to say about this 12%, because they are sitting and watching and saying, our children. Yeah, but as your children are there, what are you doing? There's something you can do. Call your professional colleagues and do something. As for the religious institutions, the second liberation in Kenya would not have become successful without the religious institutions. They came out, and as I was sitting there, it's just that time ran out. I remembered one of the most successful battles in the Bible. I'm also a Christian. One of the most a Christian human rights defender. One of the most successful battles in the Bible is when a king called King Jehoshaphat sent the choir first. And then the army sent the choir, sent other people, and then the army was behind. And everybody, you are sending the choir. Why are you sending the choir at the beginning? We will be butchered, we will be finished. But as the enemy heard the choir singing, they got confused. They were so confused. They won the war before they threw any gun, or there were no guns, any weapon. Before they used any weapon, because of the confusion. Can you imagine a scenario where every church in this country sends a choir to the forefront to lead these Gen Zs? That is their role. They send them peaceful in their gowns. They are just singing liberation songs. Christian songs are also liberation songs. They are singing those songs about the power they have and go marching. When I say go marching in, I want to be in that number. They go. Will Ruto's government shoot all the Christians in this country? Because they will be identified in those gowns. The Muslims will wear their kanzus and say whatever they have to say and move. So there are many ways. What am I trying to say by giving this? That there are many ways that everyone in Kenya can participate. And therefore, that power in numbers can be built by us provoking everybody to take up a role. Take up whatever role you can. Wear your choir gown that day of that demonstration. If I am, say, in the ACK church, and I see the choirs wearing some not very attractive gowns, but they wear them. If all of them are all the ACK churches, they start from All Saints, and they say they are going to lead those Gen Zs, and they are wearing those gowns, and just singing. Is somebody going to shoot people singing? Surely. They will be shocked. They will be shocked the way the police were shocked when those women stripped. I told you about the women stripping. The police just turned. The shooting stopped immediately. They could not go the next step. So raise numbers by provoking every institution, every profession, every person who knows something and who has breath in their life to do something. Yeah? And then, so using the different methodologies. And then democracy in poverty and resources. I came to hear about money years later, after so many battles had been. We didn't know that there are donors. There are people called donors. We didn't know that there are people who fund activities. We were just out there fighting for our nation without knowing that if we were funded, we could do even better. We could buy T-shirts. We could brand ourselves. So poverty in democracy is, as long as people know their rights, battles can be won even without resources. Resources help. Instead of you struggling here for 5 days, you would be ahead if you had resources.
Yeah.
But without resources, of course, you lose 5 days or you lose a month.
Yeah.
So the resources come, but resources cannot prevent you from moving ahead. I'm telling you, for years, I didn't know there was somebody called a donor. I didn't know. But battles were won as we moved on and moved on.
Okay.
And then something else I want to mention. Kenyans, I don't know about other nations, but I suspect it's the same because it's a human nature. Kenyans support the Freedom Corner movement. Women went there and sat with no tent, with no water. They were on a hunger strike. They didn't even have water. They just went and sat. By that evening, some young people came and said, we are security, and they came with candles. By the next day, some 2 Indians, it's important to mention that they were Indians because we think that they are not Kenyans. They came and brought a tent, and another Indian brought water. And we were like, well, who are they? So the women, the following day, were in a tent and had water. Then as time went by, different people kept doing their thing. There would be people just coming to dance the whole day. They are just dancing to support the women. So that is democracy in poverty. The little resource you have, you bring it.
Okay.
You support.
Okay.
And
So there's the question about how we move the entire movement, maybe in a minute or so. How do we get all the nations galvanizing towards this? Because this is an African problem.
It's an African problem, and sometimes you pick it in chunks. In East Africa, we can pick it in the chunk of East Africa. We have the East Africa community. One of the most, by the way, the East Africa community is one of the most organized regions of this continent, because we have put in place so many protocols that can support us. But I haven't seen anyone, maybe there are, I haven't seen even the East Africa Law Society go to court to sue what is happening to East Africans around this region. All the opposition is in jail. All the opposition is in jail in East Africa, from DRC to Kenya, Uganda, all. Us, our Gen Z is the opposition. They are also in jail or killed or whatever. What is the East Africa Law Society doing? Yeah? What is there is a court. And of course, you know, the reason why East Africans picked Tanzania, which is becoming a rogue nation, very unfortunately, is because there was peace. There was always continuous peace and respect for the rule of law and respect for citizens in Tanzania. So all the East Africa institutions, including the Africa Court, is in Arusha. But who is utilizing them? What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? So there's a way we can galvanize by showing those Kenyan Gen Zs are not alone. Internationally, international law allows any citizen to go to court. You can go to court and say, I saw Adalbert Ojwang has been killed in Kenya and the Kenya system seems not to be working. Go to the East Africa court and challenge and say, why is the system not working? Because we are East Africans and we are bound by that law. So I'm saying, what am I trying to say? That we have many avenues. Let us use them.